on Prime Crime.
Her car's in the driveway. She's not answering her door. Her back door is wide open. So I don't know what's going on.
A murder, a disappearance, and a dismemberment.
This is really the case that never ends.
And the face at the center.
So we know that you're comfortable lying when it's appropriate.
Yes.
Hi there, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and welcome to Prime Crime. This is where we do a deeper dive into the most high-profile and memorable true crime cases. This is part one of our story on the mystery and death surrounding one man over the course of almost 40 years.
I'm receiving operator 348. Yes, hi. I live in Bennett Canyon, and my next door neighbor, one of our other neighbors, found her dog on the street yesterday. Her car's in the driveway. She's not answering her door. There's packages on her doorstep. She's not answering her phone. Her back door is wide open. So I don't know what's going on.
On December 24, 2000, Los Angeles police entered the residence of 1527 Benedict Canyon Drive and discovered the dead body of 55-year-old author Susan Berman.
Susan Berman was the daughter of an infamous mobster named Davy Berman. Initial speculation was that it was a mob hit.
Berman was shot in the back of the head.
Susan was afraid of her own shadow, well, not her own shadow, but everybody else's. Susan would not allow a stranger into her home. No way.
This is a gunshot wound to her head. That means the killer had to be near her. She had to trust the killer.
There was one person in Susan Berman's life that she was very close to.
I saw this girl who looked very, very pretty, and I went over and started talking to her.
That man was Robert Durst, the heir to the renowned Durst real estate empire.
We could spend a lot of time together. We could talk. We had the things in common.
They both became incredibly loyal to each other. It was them against the world.
Durst is speaking with the producers of an HBO documentary entitled The Jinx, which aired in 2015. In that same year, Durst ends up speaking with an LA prosecutor named John Lewin as well.
You know, Susan was trying to reach you over that summer before she died, and you weren't returning her calls. Do you know why?
I don't remember any such thing. I remember...
It's these two interviews that would not only provide information on Susan Berman's death, but so much more. In order to understand Durst's connection to Berman, you have to start from the beginning with his first wife, Kathy McCormick Durst.
My oodles of education, she had zilch. I guess you would say I was marrying beneath me or something like that, or she was married.
By most accounts, the early part of the relationship between Robert Durst and Kathy was very loving and caring. But as time went on, his relationship with Kathy began to be very strained.
And was the dominant person in the marriage.
I think she kind of got tired of some of the I mean, you know, she got tired of...
Absolutely.
He began to become abusive towards her.
By 1981, our life was half arguments, fighting, slapping, pushing, wrestling.
During that time, Kathy went to nursing school and then to medical school. As she became more independent of Durst, he became more controlling and more violent.
I was basically saying, get the heck out. And she was afraid, but she thought she could handle him.
Kathy and Robert's relationship came to a screeching halt on January 31st, 1982. After Kathy left a dinner party in Connecticut, it's believed she went back to the home she shared with Durst in South Salem, New York. Kathy then vanished. In fact, there have been no confirmed sightings of her ever since.
If you think Kathy's okay, if you're trying to figure out what's wrong with her, the first thing you do is you call her family and you go, hey, have you seen Kathy? It's just a weird, do you see what seems strange about calling the police first?
Because I didn't feel like talking to her family and friends.
Durst has always maintained that the last time he saw Kathy, he drove her that night to the train station in South Salem, where she got on a train headed to New York City.
Reported her missing is their problem. Put her on the train, she came to the city, I don't know where she is.
He was the last person to see Kathy alive. He lied to police investigators.
Then you went to the mayor's.
Yeah, that's what I told the police. I was hoping that would just make everything go away. I didn't go to the mayor. I took her to the train station, went home, and went to sleep. I said, I called her. She answered the phone, and that puts her in the city.
You know that you're telling him something that's a lie.
There's also the matter of what exactly happened that night between the couple.
We didn't have a fight. We didn't wrestle. We didn't touch her.
But you did tell me in our last conversation that you did have a physical altercation that night.
Are you sure I told you that?
So we know that you're comfortable lying when it's appropriate.
Yes.
There were several factors that contributed to the fact that he did not get arrested. The detective who received the case, Michael Struck, he made a series of major mistakes and lapses in judgment, including not following through on lies that Robert Durst told him.
There's something else to consider about Kathy's disappearance, or rather, someone else.
You know, I got Susan Berman to do it. I had somebody call. And if I thought about doing something like that, I can't imagine doing it.
Coming up, what Susan Berman allegedly did that may have led to her own death.
That's what I read. I read that they figured that Susan knew a murderer. The guy obviously was friendly enough to get up and, in back of her.
In 2000, a woman named Susan Berman is found murdered in her Los Angeles home, a gunshot wound to the back of her head. Years later, her friend, real estate heir Robert Durst, sat down for separate interviews with documentary producers and an LA prosecutor named John Lewin. In their discussion of Berman's death, they revisit another mysterious moment in Durst's life when his wife, Kathy McCormick Durst, vanished in 1982. There's one odd aspect to Kathy's disappearance that may connect these two women.
You know about the call to the dean, right? That call was a big problem for New York because they're going, wait, if Kathy is dead, how can she be calling?
The day after Durst claims he dropped Kathy off at a train station in Westchester so she could travel into New York City, the dean of Kathy's medical school received a call from someone claiming to be Kathy, saying she was ill and couldn't come in for rotations.
I don't think Kathy called. Do you know who I think called? Any guesses?
The movie and Andrew was under the opinion it was Susan Berman.
Okay.
She would have said no.
Kathy Durst would never have called the dean of the school, and she would never have complained of cramps, abdominal problems, and diarrhea. Susan would always complain of her gastric problems.
If Susan Berman really covered up a potential crime for Durst, then why is she dead?
Susan Berman was killed in December of 2000. 2 months earlier, the Westchester District Attorney's Office was reopening the investigation into Kathy Durst's disappearance. And that really spooked Robert Durst.
Susan told me that she'd been contacted by Los Angeles detectives and New York detectives, and they want to come talk to me.
Susan Berman was killed because she was a witness. Susan Berman became a threat to him and his livelihood.
That wasn't true. They had not contacted her. Did you know what I just told you or no? Is that a new piece?
No, I did not know that they had not contacted
No.
her.
Susan lied to you about that. I think that Susan was trying to subtly squeeze you for money.
Susan would make a threat to anyone. And she was in desperate financial shape. He was her main man in that regard.
We know that you flew out here, San Francisco, on December 19th. I think, Bob, that you drove down to Los Angeles.
Killed Susan,
I do.
drove back.
You know, you don't take red-eye flights very often. Did you know that?
Very infrequently.
And usually you don't buy your tickets right at the counter. Would you agree?
Usually I make reservations.
Right. On December 23rd, you end up buying that ticket at 10 at night at the counter in San Francisco. Just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm just not going to be able to answer that because I just don't.
Okay. Hard to
It's
explain.
unusual.
He gets there just before she is killed, and he leaves right after she is killed, and he has a plane ticket in his own name.
There's one piece of evidence unlike anything else. After Berman was murdered, a letter was sent to the Beverly Hills Police Department. The letter, postmarked the day before police discovered Berman's body, was imprinted with Berman's address and the word cadaver.
You're writing a note to the police that only the killer could have written.
It's the misspelling of the word Beverly that's particularly strange. In Durst's conversation with the producers of the Jinx, he's confronted with a different letter he wrote to Berman.
And who you sent it to?
Susan Berman, 1527 Benedict Canyon, Beverly Hills, California. Beverly spelled wrong.
So obviously I want to ask you about the cadaver note.
Same misspelling. Well, I mean, the writing looks similar and the spelling is the same, so I can see the conclusion the cops would draw.
So I guess the question is, did you write the cadaver note?
No, I didn't write the cadaver note.
And can you tell me which one of these you wrote, or which one you didn't write?
No.
Up next, Robert Durst ends up leaving New York and he finds himself in Texas, but his plans soon lead to death.
You're not going to go and try to cut through the bone like I did, which was hard. I hated being a fugitive. I was the worst fugitive the world has ever met.
Back in the early 2000s, eccentric real estate heir Robert Durst had a problem. In New York, an investigation was reopened into the disappearance of his missing wife, Kathy McCormick Durst. In California, he had been linked to the murder of his best friend Susan Berman, an alleged witness to the suspected killing of Kathy. In order to escape media attention, he decided to move to Texas, but his troubles don't end there.
He moved to Galveston, Texas, disguised as a woman named Dorothy Siner. He rented an apartment. Across the way from him in another apartment was a guy named Morris Black. Robert Durst and Morris Black ended up spending a lot of time together.
Yet things began to sour between Durst and Black, and on one fateful night, an argument between the two turned deadly.
Morris, get out of here. I don't ever want to see you again. He takes the gun out. I grab him and the gun, and we fall down in the kitchen. The gun goes off and shoots him in the side of the face.
Robert Durst shot and killed Morris Black. He claimed he acted in self-defense. But is that true?
Robert Durst began to let his guard down. He told Morris Black about Janine Pirro's investigation. It gave Morris Black the knowledge specifically of what Robert Durst was running from. That became a huge piece of evidence of Robert Durst's motive for killing Morris Black, particularly as the evidence came out that Morris Black was starting to jam up Robert Durst for money.
What went through your mind?
I can't go to the police. My neighbor is lying on the kitchen floor. Oh, and by the way, I'm a rich guy from New York, and my first wife disappeared. I'm going to have to dismember this body.
Robert Durst was arrested for the murder of Morris Black after Morris Black's body parts were found on the beach of Galveston.
Cutting somebody up with a saw is a really difficult thing to do.
I agree.
And you've done that now twice, correct?
I'm not gonna go there.
Okay, all right.
Once.
Okay, I gotta ask.
In his explosive trial in 2003 for the murder of Morris Black, Durst took the stand and admitted he chopped up the body, but argued he killed Black in self-defense, a claim that was hard to refute given there was a critical piece of evidence missing.
Most body parts of him were found in plastic bags, except one, a kind of important one, the head, because it is the head where Robert Durst said he shot Morris Black in self-defense. Now, if the prosecution had Morris Black's complete body, they would be able to tell whether or not that was the truth or not.
The jury ended up acquitting Durst of murder.
I think some of the jurors were swayed by his celebrity and his wealth. I have to give credit to the defense team. They did an outstanding job. Even though the prosecution didn't do all that they could, I think there still was enough there circumstantially to prove his guilt.
Durst wound up pleading guilty to bail jumping and evidence tampering charges and would also violate the terms of his parole. After spending some time behind bars, Durst was released and would go on living as a free man. Yet Durst's life would change forever in 2015.
What made you do the movie?
Still sort of putting that together in my own mind.
Did not kill him by dismembering him after he was dead.
In 2003, after a Texas jury acquitted Robert Durst of murdering his neighbor Morris Black and spending some time locked away on other charges, the real estate heir was ultimately released soon after. Despite circumstantial evidence that Durst may have murdered his best friend Susan Berman and was perhaps involved in the disappearance of his first wife Kathy McCormick Durst, Durst was not criminally charged in either case. Yet beginning in 2010, Durst did something odd.
Can't tell you how much I appreciate your sitting here and going through parts of your life with me.
I enjoy doing it.
Durst agreed to a series of interviews that would eventually be produced into a documentary entitled The Jinx, which would air on HBO in 2015.
I believe that at the heart of Robert Durst's cooperation in the documentary series that became The Jinx was another film called All Good Things. All Good Things was a fictionalized story about the Robert Durst saga, written by Mark Smerling. It was directed by Andrew Jarecki. Robert Durst apparently read the script. He wanted to reach out to Andrew Jarecki and see the film.
And this made me feel bad about the movie, Andrew. I mean, the thought idea that I could kill Igor, I don't like.
His major complaint about the film was that it depicted him killing his dog, Igor. And yet the fact that the film implies that he killed 3 human beings didn't seem to pay him any mind.
While Durst would say some controversial and arguably incriminating statements, there was one moment on the documentary that changed everything. At one point, Durst goes to the bathroom, yet he doesn't realize he's on a hot mic.
Kill them all, of course.
I certainly think the bathroom confession was an actual confession.
He likes to talk. He likes to tell a story. He thinks that he can gain information and then he can spin his story, not realizing that finally he was giving information on a microphone.
This alleged bathroom confession was broadcast to the country on the series finale of The Jinx, and that's not even the most shocking part.
On the eve of the episode of The Jinx airing, he was arrested in New Orleans, Louisiana, on suspicion of illegal possession of a firearm, possession of marijuana, and it was believed that he was going to fly to Cuba.
There are lots of things that I know, and I know it's tough, and I'm guessing right now you're probably nervous, is that right? And scared? I mean, it's, this is a terrible place to be.
The interview you've been watching of Durst and LA prosecutor John Lewin occurred right after Durst was arrested in Louisiana. The tapes from this interrogation and the Jinx would prove to be critical pieces of evidence in a brand new case spearheaded by Lewin.
I do cold murder cases, complex circumstantial murder cases. Probably 90% of the cases that I do, the person that I'm sitting across from, they're like you.
That case was the People versus Robert Durst. After 15 years, the real estate heir was officially charged with first-degree murder for the killing of Susan Berman.
This is really the case that never ends. Hopefully it won't end until justice is achieved. There's been so many things that have happened. I mean, this is just the most unusual situation ever. John Lewin is putting it all together and making it all make sense. I mean, there's all these different parts, but they're all connected and they all mean something. And I think by the end of this trial, everyone's going to really understand everything that's happened.
When Robert Durst is arrested in 2015 down in Louisiana, he doesn't realize he's about to meet a new adversary.
Starting in 2013, the district attorney's office in Los Angeles reopened its investigation into the killing of Susan Berman. A prosecutor in LA who specializes in cold cases named John Lewin was assigned the case.
I feel like I know you even though I've never met you.
I believe Lewin's strategy going into that interview was to let Robert Durst know that John Lewin was the world's leading expert on Robert Durst's favorite subject, which was, of course, Robert Durst.
Your brother Doug is not your favorite person. Was that a fair statement?
That's fair.
Then they ask you the same question. Do you remember what you answered?
I said he's
It is still my favorite thing that I've heard you say.
Durst treated the interview like it was a game.
If you had killed Kathy, would you tell me?
No.
If you had killed Susan, would you tell me?
No.
There were so many moments where he just seemed to be skirting the things he knew would incriminate him.
When you killed Susan, that was not something you wanted to do.
I'm going to stay away from killing Susan.
If Durst didn't kill either Susan or Kathy, what was this exchange about?
If I tell you what I know,
Okay.
that answers your questions, what can you possibly do for me?
Okay.
He wanted something from Lewin, a non-prosecution agreement for giving some information.
At this point in your life, would you have an interest in saying what happened and telling her family?
If there was something I could do for her family,
Okay.
and it would get me, then it would be worthwhile for me.
John Lewin did not give that deal, but he did get the admission that indeed, hey, I may be able to give you something.
In this case, we have a very determined, experienced, and hardworking prosecutor. We have our work cut out for us.
Coming up, the unpredictable and bizarre trial of Robert Durst.
Wait a minute! That's a lot! But that's not a lot! It's a lot! Could you stop this?
If I go ahead and fight with you, and let's say I win,
You're not going to win.
After 20 years, Robert Durst finally found himself on trial for the murder of his friend Susan Berman. This trial was unlike any other. Not only was there a 14-month delay that interrupted the proceedings due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but the prosecution was permitted to introduce evidence about 2 other deaths to connect Durst to Berman's murder, that of his missing wife, Kathy McCormick Durst, and his former neighbor, Morris Black.
He killed Kathy Durst. Then he killed her, and then he got rid of her body. We will show that when the reinvestigation happened, and when Susan Berman told him that, you know what, I'm going to talk to investigators, that she sealed her fate. The evidence is going to show that he murdered his friend Morris Black, dismembered his corpse, And he did that because, again, Morris Black was a connection to Kathy.
When it came to Durst's defense, he did something shocking, admitting what he had denied for years.
You agree you did not just find Susan's body and somebody else killed her?
I did not find Susan's body.
Bob Durst did not kill Susan Berman, and he doesn't know who did. He did find her body shortly after someone had shot her in the back of the head.
To begin with, you didn't write the cadaver note, is that what
I didn't write the cadaver note. Whoever wrote that note had to be involved in Susan's death.
He panicked. He wrote the anonymous letter so her body would be found, and he ran.
He decided he was going to tell his story. He was very good at telling his story a lot of times and getting away with it. And his story was, I just happened to come upon my friend Susan Berman, and therefore I wrote a cadaver note and sent it to the police.
The defense also argued away Durst's infamous bathroom confession on the Jinx.
Killed them all, of course.
Bob Durst is an easy target. It wasn't a confession at all. The producers of the Jinx had come along and spent maybe 100 hours interviewing Bob and then splicing and editing that together to make him look evil.
At trial, there were many notable moments, like when defense attorneys reenacted the Morris Black shooting.
Mr. Lewin, why don't you describe it? I can't see it.
So we've got Mr. Guerin playing Mr. Black.
Or the tense call between one of Durst's friends and prosecutor Lewin.
We believe you've got information.
You're getting me upset because you weren't the person I spoke before. In a much better manner than you do.
And then there was the testimony of Durst's friend Nick Chavin, who claimed that Durst made this chilling admission.
I said, you wanted to talk about Susan, and Bob said, I had to. It was her or me, I had no choice.
Yet there was one part that we all waited to see, when at 78 years old and suffering from numerous health ailments, the accused murderer, Robert Durst, took the stand.
Did you kill Susan Berman?
No.
Do you know who did?
No, I do not.
I had the opportunity to interview two of the jurors. It's interesting, they slightly differ in their impressions of Durst on the stand.
He would talk about things in such, detail where, gosh, how could anyone go into that much detail unless it was the truth? If this is the same testimony that he gave to the Texas jury, I could understand how they would find him credible.
Did you actually see her get on the train?
She was standing on the platform with half a dozen people. The train pulled into the platform. The doors opened. Now, did I actually see Kathy walk through the doors onto the train? And the answer is, I don't know.
Maybe he might be, telling the truth in some of these things. And just like, that documentary was called The Jinx, he is the victim of the worst luck anyone has ever experienced.
I shouted Susan a couple of times. Her eyes were closed. I put my hand over her face, and it felt cold. If somebody had done this to Susan, maybe he was still here.
He was giving answers that he had already practiced giving. It just looked very rehearsed, like a performance.
My voice is very recognizable, so I decided that instead of calling 911, I would send the police a letter.
There's something to keep in mind about Durst testifying in front of juries.
You certainly have said to me that you did lie to the jury in Galveston in some way, that your lawyer encouraged you to. I don't think that's...
He didn't encourage me to. We went over the oath. In terms of the whole truth, if you want to leave out something which makes you look bad, well, try it.
Up next, the incredible cross-examination.
How is anybody supposed to figure out when you are telling the truth and when you're lying?
They would have to use their life experiences. For the whole long weekend when I did the interviews for the Jinx, I was on meth.
Okay, I'm a straight shooter. What you just told me is
In 2021, the world watched in awe as a frail and sickly Robert Durst took the stand in his trial for the murder of his friend Susan Berman, a crime that occurred 2 decades earlier. Durst claimed he found Berman dead in her home and then panicked and ran away.
Did you have any motive to kill Susan Berman?
No.
Was Susan blackmailing you?
No.
While the prosecution argued Durst killed Berman because she was a witness to the alleged murder of Durst's wife, Kathy McCormick Durst, the real estate heir denied having any knowledge about what happened to his missing spouse, and he even suggested she was a drug addict who got into trouble. He also was adamant that he shot his friend Morris Black in self-defense, which a Texas jury agreed with as they acquitted him of murder in 2003. But then, it was the state's turn to question Durst, and there was only one man for that job.
how many instances of perjury do you think you have committed during your testimony in this trial?
I lied about several times.
Prosecutor John Lewin just filleted him. I've never seen anything like it.
I believe the killer was either still in the house or in the yard.
Mr. Durst, haven't you testified that Susan's body was cold?
I did not testify that Susan's body was cold.
Do you have it ready to go or not?
Play it.
See if I can feel breath, and it felt cold.
Well, what do you have to say about that?
Her face felt cold.
She's dead. How can her breath be cold when she's dead? She's a stiff.
I could have watched Robert Durst on the stand in the Susan Berman trial with John Lewin probably forever. It was the most amazing cat and mouse game.
I think I need to congratulate you. You have just broken your personal record. You have filled up 18 lines on my tablet.
And I want to congratulate you. You set the perjury record.
I had a full, clear view of the side of his face. He would give like a little, sort of like a playful smirk to John, as if he was challenging him.
I never said I knew where Kathy was buried.
Stop. Why did you say you never said you knew where Kathy was buried? How do you know Kathy's buried at all?
Seemed like a logical step. I brought up that my wife was in this program at Lenox Hill Hospital that was supposed to help her get off of cocaine.
Mr. Durst, look what's number one. The program she wants to go to is Lenox Hill Hospital.
Oh, she was already there.
Yes, as a drug addict patient? I guess the interview would have gone something like this. Well, doctor, why do you want to join our program? I've been very impressed. Oh, have you worked here, Dr. Durst? No, actually, I'm a patient. I'm in your drug rehab down the hall. Gosh, I hope that's not going to affect my chances, will it?
After 15 days of testimony, Robert Durst finally left the witness stand. When we return, the controversial finale to the Durst saga.
Did you kill Susan Berman?
No.
But if you had, you would lie about it, correct?
Correct.
September 17th, 2021. That's the date that a verdict was reached in Robert Durst's Los Angeles trial for the 2000 murder of his friend Susan Berman. Prosecutors argue Durst killed Berman to cover up the alleged murder of his missing wife Kathy McCormick Durst in New York. After over 2 decades, with all the conversations, the interviews, a movie, a documentary, and an interrogation, we would finally get an answer as to whether Robert Durst was in fact the killer.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Robert Durst, guilty of the crime of first-degree murder of Susan Berman.
The fact that he admitted to being, in that house and, discovering her body, and the fact that, he was probably there within, minutes or even at the same time as, the real killer was, that has no credibility for me or for the rest of the jury at all. If here's a person who has, inadvertently, confessed, his explanation where it was somebody else, it's unbelievable.
We further find the allegation that in the commission of the above offense, that Susan Berman was a witness to a crime.
At the end of this discussion about Kathy's murder, we did not believe that she was a drug addict who went missing or ran away. We felt that the evidence demonstrating domestic abuse and murder was overwhelming, and this led to a unanimous guilty vote. And this supported the special circumstance.
Susan Berman was an extraordinary human being. Killing her was a terrible loss to our community. It's the judgment and sentence of this court, Mr. Durst, that you be imprisoned in the state prison for the term prescribed by law, that is, life in prison, without the possibility of parole.
While Durst learned his fate in California, there was an unexpected development in New York.
That conviction had significant implications for our office's ability to bring charges.
After almost 40 years, Robert Durst was finally charged with second-degree murder of Kathleen McCormick Durst. However, the prospect of justice for Kathy would be short-lived.
But we have unbelievable news. Robert Durst, who was convicted of killing multiple people, charged with multiple people, he has died.
When I found out that Robert Durst died, my immediate thought was that Robert Durst willed himself to live as long as he did. He wanted to be the center of attention at his trial. With that complete, I think he was done. The greatest sadness that I felt at the news of Robert Durst's death was that we would never learn what happened to Kathy Durst's body.
Yet there's an important legal implication here. Not only will Durst never stand trial for the murder of Kathy, but in California, since Durst died during the appeals process, his murder conviction was dropped.
That is absolutely ridiculous. I don't understand it at all. That rule should be revised. All this effort and energy and resources went into establishing this. Why can it be overturned and nullified so easily? I do take comfort in knowing that there was, great satisfaction in giving that guilty verdict, because it was a long time coming, especially after he was acquitted in Texas. Most people are not going to be looking at this little detail that it was overturned. I think the message is that he was finally found guilty, and that's what's going to stick in people's minds.
After all said and done, Robert Durst's worst enemy was Robert Durst. His interviews and testimony, it all helped show who he really was and what he did. I think the best place to end is actually with a statement from Robert Durst's brother Douglas after Robert's death. This is where he said, quote, "Bob lived a sad, painful, and tragic life. We hope his death brings some closure to those he hurt." That's all we have for you here on Prime Crime. Leave us your comments on Instagram and Twitter with the hashtag PrimeCrime. As always, thank you for joining us. And until next time, be safe.